My husband's boss pulled me aside and changed everything. At 62, I thought I had made peace with the shape of my life. My days unfolded with gentle predictability, quiet mornings tending to the garden, afternoons curled up with a novel, evenings beside Mark as we ate dinner in near silence, sometimes reminiscing, mostly just existing together. After nearly 4 decades of marriage, there was a comfort in the routine, even if the warmth had faded into something harder to name. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened that night. Not a scandal, not a secret affair, just a conversation. A few quiet words in a dimly lit lounge that unraveled something inside me I didn't even realize was breaking. It was supposed to be just another corporate gala, another night of nodding politely at people who barely remembered my name. Mark had been with this company for 35 years, and I had stood beside him through every promotion, every relocation, every moment that made his career shine. I had always been proud of him, still was, but I was no longer sure he remembered the version of me who once dreamed of things for herself. When his boss, Richard Caldwell, asked to speak with me privately, I thought perhaps it was about Mark, his retirement maybe, or some upcoming honor. I certainly didn't expect what came next. Richard wasn't flirtatious. He wasn't inappropriate. He was simply honest. And that honesty cut deeper than any betrayal ever could. He said something no one had ever dared to say aloud. "Evelyn, you deserve to be seen." The words echoed through me like thunder in a canyon, and in that moment, surrounded by soft jazz, expensive suits, and a husband too busy talking shop to notice I was gone, I felt something stir, not desire, not rebellion, awareness of how invisible I had become, of how long it had been since anyone looked at me like I mattered, not as a wife, not as someone's plus one, but as a whole living woman. I didn't answer Richard that night. I didn't need to. His words stayed with me long after the music stopped, long after Mark drove us home without asking where I'd been. They whispered to me the next morning when I looked in the mirror and saw not just wrinkles and gray hair, but loneliness. And that was the moment I realized something had changed. Maybe not everything, but enough. Because once you've been truly seen, it's almost impossible to go back to being invisible again. The morning after the gala, I moved through my house like a ghost. The kettle whistled softly as I stood in the kitchen, staring blankly out the window at the flower beds I'd pruned only days before. Tulips in soft hues of yellow and pink nodded in the breeze. I used to love mornings like this, peaceful, predictable. I had built my entire life on them. But now the silence felt different, like something was missing, or maybe something was beginning to wake up. Mark came down the stairs at his usual time, tie perfectly knotted phone already in hand, eyes scanning emails before he even poured his coffee. He barely looked at me as he set his travel mug on the counter. "Big meeting today," he said. I nodded. "You'll do great." He gave a quick, distracted smile, then leaned in to kiss my cheek. It was the same kiss he gave me every morning. Light, routine, emotionless. And for the first time, I didn't lean into it. When the door closed behind him, I exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. My hands wrapped around my coffee mug like it was the only warm thing in the room. I thought about Richard, about what he said, about the way he looked at me, not in a romantic way, but like he actually saw me. Not a role, not a title, just me. What startled me most wasn't the unexpected conversation we'd had, it was how much it lingered. Not in a flirtatious way, but in a deeply human one. His words had ignited a question I hadn't asked myself in decades. When was the last time I felt alive? I couldn't remember. That morning I skipped the usual laundry and grocery run. I pulled out a journal I hadn't touched in years, wiped off the thin layer of dust on its cover, and sat down at the kitchen table. I stared at the blank page for a long time before writing just 2 words, "What now?" It felt terrifying, but also honest. I spent the afternoon walking through the neighborhood, something I hadn't done in a long time without an errand in mind. As I passed by homes I'd known for years, waving politely at familiar faces, I wondered how many women felt like this, held together by duty, silenced by habit. The next day I found myself picking up the phone. My finger hovered over the screen for a moment before I finally pressed the call button. Richard answered on the second ring. His voice was calm, steady. "Evelyn, I was wondering. I said if you'd like to get a cup of coffee." There was a pause, and then, "Of course." We met at a small cafe by the lake, one of those quiet places where time feels slower. The scent of roasted beans and cinnamon rolls clung to the air. We didn't speak at first. Just sipped, just breathed, just sat. "I didn't think I'd call you," I said eventually. "I didn't think you would either," he replied gently. "But I hoped." I looked out the window at the golden leaves tumbling down in slow spirals. "Your words, they shook something loose." He nodded, waiting. "I'm not angry at Mark," I continued. "He's not cruel, he's not abusive, but I feel like I've disappeared." Richard leaned forward, his elbows resting on the small table. "That's what I saw. And I couldn't stay silent." I hesitated. "But what do I do with that? I've built a life with him. A home. Decades of memories." He nodded. "You don't have to destroy the past to reclaim your future. You just have to stop abandoning yourself in it." I didn't know how to respond. His words were calm, but they struck like lightning, brief and bright, lighting up everything I'd tried not to see. After that coffee, I didn't tell anyone where I'd been. Not because it was a secret, but because I wasn't ready to explain it, not even to myself. I went home and made dinner like I always did, set the table, waited for Mark. He was late, of course. His meeting had run long. He apologized with the same distracted air, kissed my forehead, and immediately checked his phone. That night, as he sat on the sofa reading a report, I watched him closely. The way he furrowed his brow, the way his lips moved slightly as he read to himself. The man I had loved for so long, the man I had built my world around. And yet I felt so far away from him. I remembered a time when we used to talk late into the night, when we used to laugh until our sides hurt, when we used to touch just to feel each other's presence. Where had all that gone? I realized I had stopped reaching out, because over time I had convinced myself that wanting more was selfish. That night I didn't sleep much. I lay awake listening to the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the rhythmic sound of Mark's breathing beside me. It was familiar, but it didn't comfort me. By morning I had made a decision. Not a dramatic one, not a threat, but a beginning. I asked Mark to sit down before he left for work. He looked surprised. "What's going on?" "I need to talk to you," I said quietly. "About us." His face tightened. "Is something wrong?" "I don't know," I replied. "I just feel like I've been invisible for a long time. Like I don't exist in this marriage the way I used to." He blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Invisible," I nodded. "I'm always here, always supporting you, always making sure your world runs smoothly. But I don't know the last time you asked me how I'm really doing." There was silence, long and heavy. "I thought we were okay," he said slowly. "We are," I said gently, "but just okay. And I don't know if that's enough anymore." He didn't know what to say, and maybe that said everything. That conversation didn't end in shouting or tears. There was no dramatic walkout, just a pause, a quiet acknowledgement that something had shifted. Over the next few days, I gave myself permission to exist outside of my roles. I bought a new dress, bright red, nothing like the muted tones I usually wore. I rejoined the local book club. I even took a beginner's painting class, something I hadn't done since college. And I saw Richard again, for coffee, for conversation, for no other reason than that he listened when I spoke. There was no affair, no scandal, but there was connection. There was the feeling of being seen. And that feeling was changing me, not into someone new, but into someone I had forgotten. Each passing day after that first coffee felt like waking up in a new skin, familiar yet different. It wasn't rebellion I felt, not desire, but something harder to name and even harder to ignore. It was attention, it was clarity. And for the first time in years, I had no idea what to do with either. Mark noticed something was different. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but I caught him looking at me more often, curious, slightly uncertain. He'd ask if I needed anything when he came home. He commented on dinner on my new haircut, even complimented the red dress I wore on a casual Thursday night. "That's new," he said, a little surprised. "It looks good on you." "Thank you," I replied. "I bought it for me." That pause again, a wrinkle between his brows. And then he said nothing more. I didn't mean to punish him. That was never the point. Mark wasn't a villain. He had simply stopped seeing me, and I had let him. Somewhere along the way, I traded passion for peace wonder for routine. Now that the fog had lifted, I couldn't go back to pretending I didn't miss the woman I used to be. One afternoon, I met Richard again, this time not at a cafe, but at a public park by the lake. We sat on a bench watching children chase ducks near the water's edge and dogs tug at their leashes as owners called their names. "You've changed," he said almost as an observation. "Have I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "You're sitting taller. There's color in your face. Something's shifted." I looked down at my hands folded in my lap. I don't know what this is. Us meeting like this. What it means. "It doesn't have to mean anything more than what it is," he replied gently. "You're finding your voice again. I'm just glad to witness it." I felt my throat tighten. I've spent so long living for someone else. And now I shook my head. Now I don't know how to live for myself. Richard didn't offer advice. He never pushed. But the quiet way he looked at me made something inside me unfurl, a part of me that had curled up in sleep long ago now stretching itself awake. He never asked me to choose, not once. That was what surprised me most. He never suggested I leave Mark or that he could be the solution to my awakening. He just showed up, with honesty, with kindness, with unwavering attention. At home, Mark was trying. I could see it. He started sitting with me during dinner instead of rushing to his office. He'd ask about my day, and for the first time in years, he actually listened to the answers. I told him about my book club, my painting class, even the long walks I was taking to clear my mind. He smiled, nodded, even joked once about joining me, but something about the way he smiled felt like he was trying to catch up with a version of me he hadn't seen in decades. One night I came home to find he had made dinner. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and garlic bread. But the gesture stunned me. "Thought I'd take care of you tonight," he said, placing the dish on the table. I looked at him for a moment, unsure what to say. "Thank you." We ate together in relative silence, but it wasn't awkward. It was tentative. Careful. Like we were two people slowly reaching for something fragile in the dark. Afterward, we sat in the living room, the TV humming softly in the background. Mark glanced over and said, "I know something's going on, Evelyn." My breath caught. "What do you mean, you're different?" "More alive, I guess. Happier. And I don't think I'm the reason why." I didn't speak right away. The truth trembled behind my lips, not because it was scandalous, but because it was real. "I met with Richard," I said finally. His jaw tightened slightly. "More than once?" "Yes." He nodded slowly, staring at the floor. "Are you with him?" "No," I said quickly and clearly. "Not in that way. But you think about him." I didn't deny it. Silence stretched between us like a growing chasm. Mark looked up. "Why him?" "Because he saw me," I said softly, before I even realized how unseen I was. Mark swallowed hard. "Why didn't you tell me you felt that way?" "Because I didn't want to believe it myself." He leaned back, rubbing his temples. "I've always provided. I've been loyal. I never stepped out." "I know," I said, my voice gentle. "And I'm grateful. But marriage is more than loyalty. It's about presence, about attention. And I lost yours a long time ago." His eyes glistened. "Not with rage, but grief. I didn't mean to lose you. I didn't mean to be lost." There was a long pause. "Do you love him?" he asked, barely above a whisper. I hesitated. I don't know him well enough to love him, but I respect him, and he made me realize something I couldn't unsee. He looked down again. What happens now? I don't know, I admitted, but I need to keep finding out who I am. And you need to decide if you want to meet that version of me or keep holding on to who I was. He nodded slowly, his face filled with more emotion than I'd seen in years. Then I'll try. And I believed him. That week we began couples counseling. Not because everything was broken, but because something had been forgotten. We sat in a quiet office beside each other on a beige couch, answering questions we hadn't asked in decades. What do you need? What do you miss? What makes you feel loved? I cried more in those sessions than I had in years. And so did he. There were no easy answers, no overnight fixes, but there was effort. And for now, that was enough. I still saw Richard. Less frequently. Sometimes at community events, sometimes for coffee. I told him what was happening. I'm glad, he said with a quiet smile, not because it means you're pulling away from me, but because it means you're stepping toward yourself. Thank you, I said, meaning it more deeply than he could know. Richard remained a presence in my life, not a threat, not a temptation, but a reminder. Of the moment everything began to shift, of the voice that said, "You deserve to be seen." And now, slowly, I was seeing myself too. The most surprising part of rebuilding a marriage isn't the therapy sessions or the long, honest talks. It's the small, seemingly unimportant moments that suddenly feel like progress, like hope. It was in the way Mark asked me if I wanted to go for a walk after dinner. It was in the way he touched my back when passing me in the hallway, not out of habit, but intention. It was in the way he started setting the table before I had the chance to. It had been over 4 months since the gala, and somewhere along the line we had stopped merely surviving in the same house and started slowly learning how to see each other again. But it wasn't seamless. Far from it. There were moments of tension, like when I wanted to go to a weekend workshop on creativity and aging and Mark immediately asked, "But won't that take away from our Sunday dinner with the kids?" Or when he stumbled upon a message from Richard on my phone, a simple thank you for a conversation we'd had, and his face darkened. "You're still in contact?" he asked, his voice flat. I looked at him. "Yes, Mark. We're friends." He said nothing more, but the silence that followed was louder than any argument. That night, after we'd gone to bed, I turned to him in the dark. "Do you want me to stop speaking to Richard?" He hesitated before answering. "I don't like it. But no, I don't want you to give up someone who helped you find your voice." I turned toward the ceiling, my chest tight with something I couldn't quite name. There was grace in his answer, but there was also pain, and that was something I couldn't ignore. I knew my continued contact with Richard was a thread Mark couldn't fully untangle, even if he trusted me. It represented the version of me that had changed without his permission, the version that grew in spaces where he hadn't been looking. The truth was, Richard didn't want anything more than friendship. He never crossed a line. But his presence alone had become a mirror to the gaps in my marriage, the cracks we had both painted over for decades. I needed to decide what I was building toward, not just away from. So I distanced myself, not out of shame or guilt, but clarity. Richard had been a catalyst, not a destination. One evening I called him. "Richard," I said gently, "I need to take a step back. Mark and I are trying to rebuild, and I need to give that my full heart." There was a pause. "Then I understand, Evelyn. Truly. You don't owe me anything." "I do," I said. "I owe you everything. You reminded me I'm allowed to matter." His voice was soft. "Then I've done what I came to do." And just like that, our chapter closed. Not with drama, not with tears, just gratitude. The next few weeks were quiet, focused. Mark and I fell into a new rhythm, one neither of us had ever truly known before. Not a role-playing version of husband and wife, but two people learning how to relate again. One Sunday morning, I woke up to find a note on my pillow. "You once said you felt invisible. I've been thinking about that. I see you now, and I want to keep seeing you." Mark. I held the note to my chest and wept. It wasn't about Richard anymore. It was about me, about Mark, about us, about what still could be. That afternoon, we cooked together for the first time in years. He chopped vegetables while I made the sauce. We laughed when he cut the onions too thick and burned the garlic. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that's what we were trying to be real. Honest, open, seen. At our next counseling session, our therapist asked, "What do you love about each other now?" Mark looked at me. "Her fire," he said. I thought I'd lost her. But she's still in there, braver than I ever realized. I blinked back tears, and I love that he's trying. Not because he has to, but because he wants to. There was a time when I would have never believed that marriage could evolve in your 60s, that after a lifetime together there could still be firsts. First confessions, first apologies, first kisses that felt new. But we were living proof. One late October evening, we drove out to the lake, the same one where I had once sat across from Richard, unsure of who I was becoming. Now I sat beside my husband, watching the last streaks of daylight melt into the water. He reached for my hand, threading his fingers through mine. "I know I wasn't always paying attention," he said, "but I want to now, every day." I turned to him, my voice steady. "Then let's stop looking backward." He nodded. "Only forward, only forward." The wind danced across the lake, rustling the leaves above us. And for the first time in years, I felt fully present, not wondering what might have been, not aching for something that wasn't, just here. Seen, alive, becoming. People think that the most painful part of being unseen is the loneliness. But it's not. It's the forgetting. You forget the sound of your own laughter when no one's around to hear it. You forget the way your eyes used to light up at something as simple as a new dress or a lazy Sunday morning. You forget that you were ever more than someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's quiet support system in the background of their story. For years, I thought contentment was the best I could ask for, and maybe for a time it was enough. But one private conversation reminded me that my story still mattered, that I didn't need to disappear in order to love someone else well. That being devoted didn't mean being silent, that presence is not the same as intimacy, and that it's never too late to wake up and choose yourself. Mark and I are still walking this path hand in hand now, but not because we have to, because we want to. He's learning how to listen again, and I'm learning how to speak. We don't have all the answers, but for the first time in years, we're asking the right questions. If you've ever felt invisible in your own life, I want you to hear this. You are not too old. You are not too late. You are not alone. You deserve to be seen, to be loved for the person you are, not the role you play. And maybe your story won't unfold like mine. Maybe it won't begin with a gala or a boss's quiet words. Maybe it'll begin with a journal entry, a late-night walk, a single courageous thought. But when it does, when the moment finds you, don't look away. Lean in. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt like you lost yourself in a long relationship or routine? What helped you find your way back? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Your voice might be the spark someone else needs. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that honor the quiet, powerful truths we so often keep to ourselves. You deserve more than a life that looks good on the outside. You deserve one that feels right on the inside. Thank you for watching. Thank you for seeing me. Now go see yourself.